Good. So I see quite a few people joining now. So let's get started. So thanks everyone for joining. Good afternoon if you're joining us from the UK. Good morning if you're in the US. It's absolutely sweltering if you are in the UK. So I hope you're somewhere nice and cool with a nice home blended iced tea or a cold beer. Thanks Dan and John for joining us today. I'm afraid by the mentioning of cold beer, we might have lost all our attendees, but those who are staying and those who are watching the recording, we should have some really good insights, I think, into how to tackle the kind of knotty challenge of marketing and selling to systems integrators. Just sort of the rules for the session. There's Q&A panel you should be able to see, and we'll try and take questions as we go. If we can, and we'll make sure we try and leave some time at the end as well to take questions. So yeah, the subject today is about how to market to and through systems integrators. I think we've talked about the fact that clearly systems integrators play a crucial role in the market already, and that may well become even more crucial in the months and years to come as organisations look to accelerate digital transformation. They look to shift their operating models. And we maybe see some polarization in the market as people, companies look to manage risk, and the systems integrators, clearly that's one of the things that they offer is the ability to manage risk. So clearly they're going to be a crucial channel going forward, but they're complex. They are quite often highly matrixed organizations, somewhat esoteric if you like. And so they can't, it's not simple to figure out who are the right people to talk to, and how you get the right message to the right person at the right time. And that's kind of what we're going to go through today. So thanks John and Dan for joining us. Just to introduce you quickly, for those of you listening. So John has over 20 years experience in service design and business development through transformational IT enabled outsourcing. He has helped organizations navigate complex challenges across multiple industries. He founded Adjacency in 2017, and along with trusted associates has been delivering memorable results for technology companies looking to build enterprise relationships. Adjacency unlocks growth by ensuring the true value of your offer is understood, so client-side teams move beyond do nothing and build a consensus to buy. And Dan Rush has led award-winning marketing teams on both sides of the systems integrator fence, giving him specific insights into this complex environment. His current role at Automation Anywhere, the world's largest robotic process automation RPA vendor, has seen him build the European channel marketing strategy and the team from scratch. And prior to that, he steered KPMG's first foray into the SMB market with a cloud-based accounting service, from 50 clients to 3,000 clients in just 2 years. Sounds like a hell of a journey. By devising and delivering a full rebrand and then executing a unique integrated marketing strategy. So welcome, John and Dan. So just to, I guess, start to break that challenge down, maybe we can start with you, John, if you can just give us a bit of an introduction to how we might see the market and a bit of an overview of the market.
Certainly, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. If you could move on a couple of slides, maybe that'd be great. So just a few takeaways from really about the market. It's huge in Europe particularly. It comprises the three main services that we've seen over the last 20 odd years in terms of infrastructure, which still dominates applications and BPO. In terms of European diversity, UK is the biggest. It's a market that broadly tracks GDP, so it'd be interesting to see what happens as a consequence of the COVID the situation rather. But there have been some commentators who've been predicting it falling away and not growing, largely because of the likes of Automation Anywhere, who we'll hear from during the webinar, in terms of how they are disrupting and other technology providers are disrupting the traditional services play. But I think you said something, David, in your intro that is going to remain relevant, in that customers will still want organisations to shoulder the burden of risk for a digital transformation. So there will always be a place for them, I think. And you can kind of see that as they have navigated the decline of traditional infrastructure outsourcing and some of the legacy BPO services, and replaced those with cloud, automation, digitization, Industry 4.0. And I think perhaps COVID will have the same impact. There'll be certain reconfigurations as organizations look to pivot away from industries that are impacted. Take Rolls-Royce, for example. You can't imagine that in addition to making thousands of people sadly redundant, they aren't asking their suppliers to take a haircut on the services that they deliver, and some of those suppliers will be systems integrators. A significant range of providers, but not a massive market. They do broadly fall into categories. There may be some tweaking around the edges, the likes of DXC with its decision to do something about workplace and some of its BPO services. So there may be some consolidations and shifting. Again, I think it's useful if you are considering tackling this market to understand some of the heritage, but not allow yourself to be typecast by that. What I mean is, so take Tata TCS, for example. It's wrong to think of that as an Indian outsourcer. That's a global multi-tower IT services provider in the same vein as IBM and Accenture, in my opinion. So be aware of the heritage, but don't fall into the typecast category, and also be aware for some of the newer organisations, or not new as in history, but new to this, seeing them as this type of channel for the likes of the people on the call. So, for example, the consulting organisations have come into the mix because of the accessibility of automation and analytics. So they've provided wrap services, and then you've got some of the functional rising stars like AWS and Tech Mahindra who are punching above their weight in certain circumstances, and AWS in particular are adding big deal capability to the European.
Do you think that we might see polarization in more going to some of the bigger players, and maybe some of the middle being really challenged because of the way people are trying to manage risk?
I think again it could be industry specific. So I think for those industries that are doing pretty well at the moment, online retail, for example, they may not need the bench strength of the big boys, whereas actually if someone is looking for using this current situation as an opportunity to accelerate their digital transformation, they may want access to the resources and the buying power of the bigger boys. So I do think it'll be perhaps driven by the industry response to the current crisis, not necessarily that these organisations themselves, which does have implications for partnering and their supply chain.
Yeah, and Dan, I mean, automation anyway, RPA is clearly it's a hyper growth market. I guess it's perhaps the growth market and a hot trend for a lot of these companies. How does that characterise the relationship that you have with the SIs, or how you see the market?
Well, it's different in every case, to be honest, and that's part of the challenge that I guess we're exploring on the webinar today, and I'll go through in a bit more detail later. But of this list here, then, you know, on paper, Automation Anywhere is partnered to a greater or lesser degree with all of these organisations here. So, you know, we're super fast growing, but we're only 3,000 people globally. You know, we still consider ourselves a startup. We try to act nimbly and quickly. And, you know, almost all of these organizations here are, you know, tens of hundreds of thousands of people, and they don't behave in the same manner. They're trying to work out how automation, how artificial intelligence, how robotics can, you know, impact what they do, you know, what service they provide to their clients. And so that presents us with a challenge, because we've got to take a different approach to every single one of these, given our resource constraints. So, you know, what we're trying to do is pick the partner, pick the systems integrator that gets automation, understands what they, you know, what their client proposition is, and that's where we want to place our bets. And hopefully they place the bets on us too.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was something on LinkedIn yesterday that was using the analogy of Guess Who to talk about. They were talking about identifying the right IT buyer, I think, but a similar analogy can be used here in trying to knock down the various Brendas and Donalds and whoever the other people are, and find the right people and right partners for you. And I think that's kind of what we're going to try and explore through the rest of the session. So, John, just in terms of starting to get our heads into thinking like an SI and understanding how what motivates them, so we can then think about how we market to them. They're clearly very driven by the market and by the themes and the trends. We've mentioned some of them already, but what are the implications of that for how we approach them?
Yes. So the themes, this is taken from a piece of research done by Global Data for the market, and it's a kind of bingo of buzzwords in this space. What I think is interesting about the thread between the ones that they've highlighted as being most important is it's the things that the SI's customers are struggling with. So it's the things that enable personalization, that enable connectivity of that personalization, so that the end customer, not as in a consumer or anything, but the end customer of the SI is able to personalize its services and deliver digital transformation it needs to its customer base, whoever that may be it other businesses or individuals. I think what is perhaps more interesting is the kind of trends that we're seeing in the way they're behaving. So the first one being supplier to partner, and those of you as old as I am, this sounds like a rebadge of solution selling. So this is about co-creating value with customers. This is about getting further up the decision-making process to help inform the transformation that a customer wants to go on, so that you can be a kind of trusted advisor and advocate in order to acquire the business. And I think this is a consequence of the way that perhaps the offshore and new entrants have now matured. A few years ago, it would have all been about, we don't need to do any consulting or define what the requirement is, because you just buy whatever capacity or the services you want from us and go do it yourself. Whereas that's no longer working for the likes of TCS, to use them as a similar example. So they're very much in this co-creation. WNS is saying they use the co-creation language all the time. So it's all about getting ahead of the decision-making process and influencing what those outcomes are. Coupled with that is selling outside IT. So as IT gets further or easier to consume by the business, and again, automation anywhere is a great example, then budgets will have been moved away from IT. IT still have a role to play clearly and still have orchestration and governance and some significant budgets, but a lot of decision making has been, particularly for IT solutions and services and transformations, has been moved out to the business compared to what it might have been like 5-10 years ago. So that's meaning that the SI is now having to develop and expand its relationship base outside of what might have been considered its traditional heartland. And again, following on from that, is it's forcing them to be a lot more local, a lot more personal to their organisation. So you could look at what HCL and Cognizant have done in the Nordics, for example, where they've acquired capability from their customers in order to build a presence in region. And then the final one that I'm seeing in particular is that as the end customer is going on this digital transformation journey, which is why it's engaging with the likes of an SI in order to wrap the program and take some risk, the end customer is worried about how to differentiate itself. If everything's digitized, if you're, I don't know, Barclays and HSBC, and the experience is completely 100% STP and digital from application to loan advance, how do you differentiate yourself? Except on price. And so this idea of bringing the human touch back into the digital transformation is something that the SIs are wrestling with in order to help their customers differentiate themselves in times of hyper automation.
I think what's interesting about that list is that those challenges, those aspirations are things that I think we'd recognise as being true for a lot of vendors as well. You know, that particularly the desire to to act as a partner, to sell outside the IT department, sell to the business. And then that point about being close to the customer, I think we'll probably go on to talk about that a bit. That's potentially a leverage that the vendor can use in the relationships with the SI.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if we're talking about then understanding the SI and what motivates them, clearly the individuals and who do you talk to within the SI is one of the key questions that you've got to answer. There's obviously lots of different teams. There might be the alliances partner, and then you've got the technical teams, you've got sales side teams, you've got CTOs, etc., solution architects. That's complex to navigate. But so let's just start thinking about how we might sort of break that challenge down and just look at the structure of the SI and then some of the individuals within it.
Yeah. So to answer that question, it is a real challenging one, particularly because they're all, Dan said, they're kind of large, global, complex matrix organisations. You've got to break the problem down, and I think the simplest way to think about it is to remind yourself what a system service integrator does, and it's kind of it is a really simple business. It's a prime contractor model. So largely, not exclusively, but largely, some are building IP and investing in creating product. Largely, it's integrating capability from themselves and capacity and experience with providers from their supply chain, be that the likes of Automation Anywhere, be that SAP or whoever, and combining it together to, ideally for the systems integrator, to create a annuity service, so a multi-year revenue stream, because these services take a lot of sales, design and implementation. What that means is that, yes, there are all those roles that you describe, but actually the value for the SI is in the contract. They have to think hard about how they assemble the capabilities that they have access to avoid being uncompetitive, because a large organization like Shell, if it's doing a finance transformation, can go and buy the individual components themselves. They've got capacity in spades. So how do you add value over and above what a large end customer organization can do itself? So the value is in the contract. Yes, it's also in the way that you assemble the supply chain and the expertise you have. But I just want to hang on to that, the value being in the contract, if we move quickly on to the next one. And this is just a simple representation of the engagement process. What it means is, if you think about the priority for the SI is to win and defend its revenue, like every other business pretty much, then there are sweet spots about when is best to engage. So if you can have move the needle on their ability to win or defend revenue, then they're going to listen to you. The other time they're going to listen to you is if they have a distressed contract, and many annuity contracts, whilst they deliver margins, don't necessarily deliver the margin that was expected at the point they were signed. But those are really hard to find. So unless you know the organisation and have built trust so they will volunteer which of their contracts are distressed, it's really hard to find from the outside. Whereas there's lots of information sources that you can go to in order to work out what contracts are broadly likely to be churning in the next 12 to 18 months. And there's some research by Horses for Sources recently that said that I think it was a significant number, more than in previous years, contracts are likely to be churning in the next 12 to 18 months. So now is a good time to go hunting for those contracts. It's not going to work in every scenario, and it doesn't mean to say that you won't get in through the other roles that we'll talk about later, but it just means where is the kind of open door likely to be. So if it were me and I were campaigning, I would be campaigning around where am I likely to get some airtime, and which, in my experience of living in this world for a long time, the things that they care about most are winning and defending revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting. And are there, potentially false trails, if that's the right analogy, where you might get a lot of time and enthusiasm for people perhaps on the technical side, but actually those conversations don't end up driving the the preference for your technology in the contract or a revenue stream for you.
Absolutely. I don't know if Dan's got some anecdotes to share here, but certainly in my experience, we always had an alliances function. 9 times out of 10, the alliances function was a gatekeeper to prevent the business being hassled by suppliers who weren't currently within the supply chain. And how you got in to become an alliance partner is if you were successful on a delivery or a new deal. And it became a kind of, the alliances function wasn't necessarily a design function to strategically plan where the capabilities and partnerships we need, because the SI world is littered with build and they will come failures. And so what they tend to be is a way of how do we get the best from the partners that we've already got established.
Yeah, I would recognise that, and for us as a new entrant into Europe, not as an organisation, but as a region, then it's a bit of a chicken and egg, or it was a bit of a chicken and egg for us. That we had some contacts with some of these systems integrators, but until we had a shared customer, it was hard for us to engage. So we've tried various tactics, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, it's hard to start from scratch as a smallish vendor and navigate these complex organisations.
Mm. And is that point about timing? Is that you recognise that as something that's important? Perhaps there's some serendipity in it, but being able to get in at the right time in that process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it would have been better if we'd timed it 3 years earlier, to be honest. But we are where we are, so we've done what we can to catch up. So, yeah, but that's a business decision that was taken before I joined. But yeah, you can always look at things in hindsight.
Good. So, just in terms of then how we're thinking about, I think if as you go through that process, you'll be very clear on your agenda, and I think partly if we're talking about the potential for there to be false trails, or for systems integrators to perhaps take a lot from the relationship, you've got to be very clear what you want from it, and there are different ways to play that sales motion. So you just want to talk us through the basic model.
Yeah. So as you say, once you've kind of got your head around that they're quite straightforward businesses, that where the lion's share of the motivation is, I'm just picking out where are the easier places to start, in my opinion. You can go anywhere, but where are the easier ones? Then you kind of work out what's your end game. Now, these 3 end games aren't mutually exclusive. There are plenty of organisations who do all of them, who might move from one to the other from time to time, do some, and simply starting on the left-hand side. So the sell to is if you have a capability that affects, improves, delivers value to the fabric of the business, to that kind of infrastructure, then that's the sell to. You're not differentiating their existing relationships to their end customers as an SI, unless it means that they can deliver lower overhead, for example. So you see some certain synergies in the market where I think it's Atos and Conduent have a relationship. One delivers IT services to one, and one delivers HR and services to the other. So what they're doing there is leveraging each other's skill and scale to reduce the overheads within the business, which ultimately will translate to value to the end customer hopefully by better pricing of the core services. Sell through is where the SI has, I think, quite a lot of maturity and understanding and capability into the product. Reseller is a good example here, where the product or service might be rebadged or hidden or white labeled. There's a margin implication trade, because if the SI is marking the capability up, then you don't want to be uncompetitive, but then your cost of sales should be a lot less because it's a sell once model. So there's a trade there that needs to happen. But so the sell through, as I say, largely where you've got some client specific value, but it's wrapped inside the wider offer. And then the with is kind of like that co-creation model, very customer specific, you're front and center with the SI, so you might be on the same deal team, same account team. You might be the sell with. It might be an interesting commercial model where you're not necessarily being bought through the services contract. You might be part of a managing agent style relationship. So kind of like the Siam type deals that were very popular 5-10 years ago. There was a lot of sell with in those sorts of where different providers would get together to deliver different towers of capability. And you're very visible to the end customer in that model. So they're different types of model, but they broadly fall into 3 categories. And Dan, I don't know if you've got some things to share from Automation Anywhere in how you play in some of these.
Yeah, so we definitely recognise that. I think our strength in terms of our work with systems integrators has definitely been on the sell to. So we have strong relationships and strong commercial relationships in providing our software to many of those organizations that were highlighted on the first slide, for them to improve their own operational efficiencies within their business. That's a market that we didn't need too much help with. The challenge for us was aligning with the sort of client facing teams with the sell through and the sell with piece. That's where we were lacking a little bit. And that's the challenge that we're still seeking to overcome.
Mm. And I think one of the really interesting points in this is about personality, and we've talked a little bit about the roles and the different functions, but when we were talking this through beforehand, we were talking about the fact that you might target the sales team, for example, as being the ones wielding particular influence at the right stage, but there's also an element of personality who's got the ability to make changes. Is that something that you recognise, Dan, from your experiences today?
Yeah. Again, we only had a relatively sparse team, and primarily we were engaged with the alliances folk at the partners. Across, in other times, we had pockets of influence in, with their technology teams or their client teams, but it was very sporadic. And to be honest, as a new entrant to the region, we didn't have full visibility of a picture like this. So we were chipping away, trying to make the most of the relationships that we had. But something needed to change. So which is what I'll go on to in a minute. But this is a nice graphic, but when you're in the coalface, it's harder to visualize all these different streams and the complexity of the organizations that we're trying to curry favor with.
Yeah, from your experience from the inside, John, what would be your advice about navigating this picture? Well,
so the one thing to bear in mind is the way that when these guys sign one of these large contracts, the kind of die is often cast at that point in terms of the capabilities they can use, and they're the different terminology for it, whether it's the contracted model or the model of record or whatever. But what that means is that somebody up front has done some design, made some decisions about the capabilities and the transformation steps that are going on. And so if you're trying to introduce something new after the event, you're kind of giving the guys and girls on the left-hand side of the chart a bit of a problem, because they've got to then justify why they should swap one capability out from another, particularly if it's part of the standard. And so traction is difficult unless there's a big risk with one of the accounts. Whereas if you go to the sales and solutions side and say, we're not going to win this, I know it's not standard, but we're not going to win this piece of business without partner X for whatever reason, then those guys, generally speaking, have the personality to bully the organization into forcing that choice. And then it becomes one of cross-fertilization via the alliances and delivery and all the other guys in order to expand out from that one base. And that's not to downplay some of those other roles on there, but it's just saying where kind of the people most likely to make something most happen, because you're not going to do it without delivery saying yes, or at least not a no. But as I say, oftentimes, if you're not careful, presenting a new capability to them is just creating a problem for them, because they've got to think about, why do it differently to the way I've always done it. Mm. Now, the one thing that when we were drawing the picture, it's kind of an unwritten audience on there, but is the end customer. So if you can get sponsorship from the end customer into an organisation, I have seen this happen, where that happened in one of my deals many years ago, where the client coached us onto the capabilities that they wanted inside the service, and we wouldn't have won the deal had we not used that particular provider. So while this is looking at the SI in particular, there is no substitute also for getting the end customer to sponsor you in, if that is appropriate for the motions that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's lots of implications for how you go about marketing, I think, there, isn't there? In terms of, yes, you're looking to go for the sales audience. I think we talked a bit about when we spoke about the Challenger customer and the research that Challenger Group have done, that says actually often the best customer is not necessarily the coach or the guide. Even the people who are giving you lots of information might feel like the right people, but they're actually the go-getter type of personalities who are sort of bullish about creating change. So you've got to give them the ammunition, and then perhaps, as you also would like, ideally a bit of a pincer movement to make sure that the delivery teams are comfortable with that, and you can push that through. And then the idea of the end customer, your end customer relationships being like a key point of leverage, that feels like a really important insight, doesn't it? So let's have a look at have a look at a case study, and Dan and Automation Anywhere, and we've done some work with them recently to try and tackle this challenge and navigate a few of the organisations within that SI market and try and find the right people to have the right conversations with. So let's just talk a bit about how you've found that, Dan, and what lessons you've learned along the way.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Okay, so this campaign ran the middle of last year. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit in the world since then, but I think that the strategy is still valid. The context for us was that, as I've explained, we had a lot of partners in the region, but we have had very few partner account managers and very few partner sales people to kind of map to those accounts, and they were already struggling to make any inroads into the SIs for reasons that we've gone through. You clearly need dedicated and sustained resources and an understanding of how they operate to make any progress. And the other challenge that we faced was that many of the partners we wanted to work with already had an arrangement with an RPA vendor or two other RPA vendors. So there was a level of inertia from them to say, well, we don't really know you, and even if we needed an RPA vendor, we've already got a couple in our kit bag. So we faced a couple of challenges. First about resource, and secondly in terms of interest from the systems integrators we wanted to work with. So that was a double challenge. But I felt that we could do something from a marketing perspective to move things along quickly and effectively. So if you just move forward on. So the scope of the project was this, and I guess within Automation Anywhere there was an expectation that partner marketing, so myself and my team, our primary role was to arrange events and activities with these partners or with any partners, because in the US and in India we're the market leader, we're number one. These types of organizations come to us and say, hey, we want to run some events together. We want to do some campaigns together because we need you. We want to be working with you. In Europe, we were late to market. As I said, we were third in terms of the RPA vendor stack. So we had a real challenge. So we thought, let's run a pilot project. Let's choose a select group of partners who we want to work with. And the ones we chose were these 5 here. And the ones we chose were most of the systems integrators we'd tried to align with basically said, we'll work with you as long as you bring us a customer. And we didn't have that many customers, so we thought that's not going to work. So we chose these guys because of their proximity to the C-suite in very large organizations. And as we discussed earlier, RPA is not an IT sell, or not initially. Where it works best and where it scales best is where senior folk across lines of business are engaged and involved. And where it doesn't particularly work is if someone from IT is trying to sell this to IT people. So that's why we chose these guys, and with their consulting background, that seemed to align well with our message. In terms of the region, sorry,
I was just going to say it's I think it's interesting, and again that trend is something I think you see across a lot of different categories within the technology market. The fact that the desire to shift outside the IT organisation, the fact that the budget and the influence is moving to the business decision makers, and it's just interesting that the role that the consultative end of the SI market might play in that transition going forward.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the region, we chose the UK because we started here first in Europe and we had more people, so it was more of an expedient decision. And in terms of the goals, we wanted to identify influential contacts at these organizations, and then engage them, with a high level but differentiated position to kind of kickstart the relationship. We had small pockets of engagement with these guys, but at no level of scale. So that was the objective, really, just to kind of open some new relationships up and get them to pay attention to us at a very basic level. So this was the campaign, the pilot campaign. So the partner ready proposition was all about scalability. We felt this was our biggest differentiator compared to other vendors. So most of these 5 organizations might have done some RPA projects, but none of them would have been at any scale. So we tried to mirror that kind of message with this kind of Grange Hill style pop-up graphic here. But the cube here was an A4 piece of paper that got sent through the post as a direct mail, and then popped up into scaled up into a nice tactile cube. So from a kind of marketing piece of fun, then we wanted to do something novel and interesting and relatively cost effective. So that was the vehicle that we chose. We also backed that up with some content on the cube that talked to one of our biggest deployments globally, which was a bank in South America, Bancolombia, that actually deployed 10,000 bots using our software, which is way above most of our competitors. So we wanted to kind of prove our capability, but also make the partners and the systems integrators kind of feel a little bit envious, and playing to their sort of base emotions of, if automation anywhere can scale to 10,000 bots, then actually I want a piece of that, and I want to introduce that to my clients, because then that's going to maximize my revenues, recurring revenues, and make me a bit richer than if I'm just doing small projects. So we play to their emotions with the material. And then finally there was sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's really, really nice. We talked about the need to understand their motivations kind of financially and play to that, but the fact that you can sort of play with the ego a bit and pull some of the emotional strings, I think is a really good point.
Yeah. And,
so carry on there.
No problem. And then the final piece was more about credibility. So I mentioned earlier, we already, all of these organizations were already customers of Automation Anywhere in some corner of the globe. So they already bought our software to use internally. So we use that as a point of reference on the cube to say, hey, Accenture, did you know that you use our software at a significant scale within your whatever team it was, just to kind of build that alignment and say, you use us, so actually why don't you also use us to sell to your clients? So we had a good kind of message there. It was just catching their attention. And I guess that brings me on to the second point, so mapping the audience. And we didn't know that much really, and this was sort of more of a Donald Rumsfeld moment, because you know, we had contacts at these organizations we knew. You know, we had contacts we knew we didn't know, and you know, there was a load of people who we definitely didn't know, but we wanted to know. So we gave that brief to two guys at TMP, very tight brief, and thankfully he came back with something a little bit logical, which mapped out the organizational structure of these organizations as was shown earlier, or similar to how it was shown earlier, and also, you know, sort of 50 key contacts within each of the partners. And we kind of validated that internally, because there was you know, we didn't give all of our contacts to TMP, but there was people on there that we already knew that they found, so we knew the list was solid. So that was a real big bonus, because that helped us get started much quicker than a partner sales or a partner account manager could do one-on-one. And then finally, the kind of marketing comms piece, the outreach. You know, there was a stage comms plan, ensured the direct mail arrived at to the right person at the right time, and it wouldn't get stuck in a post room, that kind of hygiene stuff. That was followed up by, you know, email with a very similar message to what was conveyed on the scale cube. There was also a bit of, you know, I guess it's called social selling now. So we had someone from TMP spoof as an AA employee. So he connected with the key people who we wanted to connect with, and you know, move on from there and set those meetings and set those appointments for our sales teams to engage. And you know, in terms of outcomes, it was incredibly successful. There was 276 contacts that were generated, and that says 30, but there was actually 36 meetings generated, so 13% hit rate, which, you know, for a direct mail or direct marketing campaign is pretty good. I guess these guys are partners, so they had a slightly different interest in, and they already knew who we were to some extent, but you know, we were very pleased with that statistic.
And yeah, that ability to not only map the structure, but then go and talk to the people and understand the nuances of the relationship and who's got the power and who can drive the relationship forward, I think was an important part of the end result.
Yeah.
So just in terms then of how that program's now looking to scale up.
Yeah. So I guess what this meant was that you know, started a lot of different discussions with the partners, and you know, actually quite a few of them told us to stop with the campaign, because the key decision makers within Deloitte, for example, were getting overwhelmed by requests from other people within Deloitte to say, hey, you know, what are these Automation Anywhere guys doing? You know, should we be working with them? Should we be doing more things? So we kind of deliberately annoyed them, but it worked well. And you know, the outcome from that was you know, a big win with Deloitte. We signed a joint venture with them. We've launched a managed service platform, which is using our software on their managed service, and that's going out to their clients imminently. I wouldn't claim all the credit for that from this campaign, but it definitely helped you know, generate greater awareness, get faster speed to market, and greater alignment. So you know, that was a big success from this campaign. And then finally, in terms of the longer piece, which is the final point here, I think on the next one, the idea behind this campaign, it wasn't just a one-hit wonder. It helped us get really, you know, really up to speed with a number of these partners really quickly, which was the objective. But you know, the intention is to continue to nurture the contacts that we didn't engage with initially. You know, keep them interested, and the other point is that now we've hired more partner account managers, more partner salespeople who are able to take the contacts that have been generated through this campaign, the engagement that has been generated, and more quickly, you know, build that kind of you know, sell with motion that was entirely the objective of this. So you know, it's been a great success from that side of things. So
great.
Thank you to TMP for helping us get things moving.
It's been a pleasure. It'll be really interesting to see how it evolves. So yeah, that was great. Thanks, Dan, for that. I think we're probably just running up against the clock. This is just an attempt to try and sort of gather together some of the advice points, some of the messages that we've covered throughout the discussion today. If anyone does have any questions, do just quickly pop them in the Q&A. But I think we've talked, you know, about the fact that clearly the first challenge is to identify where the real influence lies, both in terms of roles and individuals, and where in that process then you can have the most influence. But I think what we're seeing from the case study is heavily contextual. So it depends on the personalities, the organisation, the sales model that you're trying to play. So you have to work the network in each case. Be very clear about your end game, so you can be rigorous in the way that you deal with that, and then try and put yourself in their shoes and see yourself as the SI would, and leverage the strengths, particularly the customer relationships. We've got one question, if you're all right, quickly for time there. It was, what was John's worst experience of selling alongside a vendor as part of one team in the eyes of the customer? Don't need to name names here.
I think part of it was a bit of nervousness on both sides, actually. One was nervousness that if we opened the kimono too much, we were realistic enough to know that the end customer had some skills and capabilities that we had, so could cherry pick the supply chain and go do it themselves. So we were always wargaming the do nothing or the DIY solution. So in-house, from an SI's perspective, is often one of the biggest competitors. I kind of do nothing's the biggest competitor in my experience, then in-house doing it themselves second. So there's a bit of nervousness there from our part that we would open up too much. And then the second would be nervousness on the part of the partner, being fearful that they were there just for bid candy and not actually going to get any revenue out of it for themselves and put a lot of effort. That because the selling an annuity style deal, it takes an awful lot of energy, effort and time. Would that consume too much of the partner's resources because they're not designed to sell like that? So there were some tensions to navigate around those two things.
Interesting, yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I think we've probably run out of time, but thank you very much, John and Dan, for your time. I thought it was really interesting. Lots of good insight there. We will make sure the recording is shared with all the attendees, and it will go on our Homeschooling for B2B Marketers page, along with some other useful similar content around social selling and sales enablement. So thanks again, guys, and yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of the day and have a nice cold drink.
Yes.
Cheers. Thanks all. Cheers.
Thank you.